Claire woke up that morning with a knot in her stomach. The first of the month always carried pressure, but this time it felt heavier. Rent was due, and she didn't have enough. She sat by the small window of her apartment, staring at the street below, trying to think of ways to explain what she couldn't pay. The coffee on her table had gone cold hours ago, untouched. Every sound from the hallway made her jump. She had been a reliable tenant since the day she moved in, always paying on time, never causing problems. But the bookstore where she worked had cut her hours and no second job had come through yet. She was running on savings, and now even those were gone. Her hands trembled when she thought about what it meant to be late. She imagined notices on her door, calls she couldn't return. Maybe even losing the apartment she had worked so hard to keep. Then came the sound she had been dreading. A knock. Firm, not harsh, but enough to make her chest tighten. She took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had rehearsed excuses all morning, phrases like next week or I just need time. None of them felt strong enough. When she opened the door, Marcus stood there. He wasn't just her landlord, he was someone she had quietly admired since moving in. Marcus was tall, broad-shouldered, but what stood out most was the calm way he carried himself. His voice was always steady, never rushed. He had a way of making people feel like he was listening, even when he said very little. "Claire," he said, his tone gentle, almost warm. "Just checking in. Today's the 1st. His words made her throat close up. She wanted to speak, but the truth pressed harder than any excuse she could invent. Her eyes dropped to the floor, her voice quiet. "Marcus, I don't have it all this month. I'm sorry." Before she could finish, he lifted a hand, stopping her. Not in anger, but in reassurance. His eyes met hers, steady and calm. "Don't panic," he said softly. "Let's talk about it." Claire blinked. She hadn't expected that. Most landlords she had heard about in stories or from friends would be quick to remind her of rules, contracts, and penalties. Instead, Marcus leaned slightly against the doorframe, as if he wasn't here to collect, but to understand. She hesitated, confused. "I just don't want you to think I'm irresponsible. I know," Marcus interrupted, still gentle. "You've never been late? Not once. You don't need to explain that to me." The tension in her chest loosened, though her nerves still kept her on edge. So, what happens now? For the first time since he knocked, Marcus smiled, not a wide grin, but the kind that carried reassurance. "What happens now," he said slowly, "is that you take a breath. No one's throwing you out. No threats. Let's figure this out in a way that works." Claire's heart skipped. The relief was sharp, almost painful, like air rushing back into her lungs after being held too long. She didn't know how to respond. Gratitude mixed with something else's strange warmth rising in her chest that had nothing to do with money. Marcus glanced past her into the apartment, then back at her. "I've seen how hard you're working, Claire. You're not someone who gives up. That counts for more than you realize." The words landed heavy. She wanted to believe them. In that moment, standing at her doorway, felt seen, not just as a tenant with overdue rent, but as a person. The silence stretched, filled with unspoken thoughts. Claire's hand tightened on the doorframe, trying to steady herself. This was not how she imagined the conversation would go. She expected rules and deadlines. Instead, there was patience, concern, and something she couldn't name. Finally, Marcus spoke again, his voice low but certain. "Don't worry, Claire. We'll work this out. But understand this, you don't have to carry everything alone." She nodded slowly, unable to find words. His tone wasn't pitying. It was steady, like an anchor in the storm she had been drowning in. And yet, beneath the relief, she felt a pull toward him. Quiet, but undeniable. When Marcus turned to leave, promising to come back later to discuss options, Claire closed the door and leaned against it. Her pulse was racing, not just from fear, but from something else entirely. She had prepared for a conversation about losing her home. Instead, she was left with a question she hadn't expected. Why did her landlord's voice make her heart beat this way? The next evening, Marcus returned. Claire had spent the whole day in quiet worry. Pacing between her small kitchen and the window, wondering what he meant when he said they could work something out. She had imagined every possible outcome, from a strict repayment schedule to maybe even a warning letter slipped under her door. None of those thoughts gave her peace. So when she heard another knock, her heart leaped and her palms grew damp. She opened the door to see him standing there again, calm as ever. Marcus carried no clipboard, no papers, nothing official, just himself, wearing that steady look that made people pause. "Hey," he said in his low voice. "Mind if we talk?" Claire nodded and stepped aside. He walked in, and somehow his presence filled the small living room without feeling heavy. She sat on the couch, nervous, while he leaned against the wall across from her. "I've been thinking," Marcus began, folding his arms. "You've always been reliable. I know this isn't about you avoiding responsibility. Times are hard and you're doing your best. So instead of piling more stress on you, I want to offer another way." Claire's chest tightened. Another way. Yes, his eyes softened. "There's an apartment downstairs that I'm renovating. It's old, it needs care painting, sanding, fixing the floors. I've been working on it, but it's too much alone. What I need is help. Someone patient, someone who'll put the time in. That's where you come in." Claire blinked. "Me, renovations." Marcus nodded. "You'd be surprised what you can do once you try. You don't have to be a professional. I'll guide you. The way I see it, if you put in some hours helping me, I'll ease up on the rent until you get back on your feet. No late fees, no pressure. Just an exchange of effort." For a moment, Claire couldn't speak. She had expected kindness at most, but not this. Not an opportunity that sounded almost like partnership instead of pity. "You'd really do that for me?" She whispered. "I'm not doing it for you," Marcus said. "I'm doing it with you." Big difference. This isn't charity, Claire. It's a fair trade. You keep your dignity, I get the help I need, and you don't drown under debt. Simple. She looked at him, searching for any sign of hidden motives. But what she saw was sincerity. He wasn't a man who wasted words. When he spoke, he meant them. And yet there was something else in the way his gaze lingered, something unspoken. Claire's hands fidgeted in her lap. "I've never done work like that. I might slow you down." He smiled faintly. "Then we'll go slow. It's not about speed. It's about showing up, about trying." And honestly, he let out a soft chuckle. "I could use the company." The words slipped past her defenses. She wasn't just being asked to work, she was being invited into his world. The thought scared her, but also warmed her in a way she hadn't expected. She nodded, her voice small. "All right, I'll do it." Marcus's smile deepened, this time reaching his eyes. "Good, we'll start tomorrow evening. I'll bring the supplies. Just wear something you don't mind getting paint on." For the first time in weeks, Claire felt the crushing weight of fear lift slightly. She wasn't out of her troubles yet. She wasn't facing them alone. As Marcus headed for the door, he paused, his hand resting on the knob. "One more thing," he said quietly. "Don't think of this as me doing you a favor. Think of it as me trusting you enough to let you into the work I care about. That matters." When the door closed behind him, Claire sat frozen on the couch, her heart racing. She had expected anger, maybe disappointment. Instead, she had been offered trust. And beneath that trust, there was something else, something she didn't dare name just yet. The next day arrived quickly. Claire stood in front of her closet, staring at her clothes, laughing nervously at how unprepared she was for this. Eventually, she picked an old pair of jeans and a t-shirt, tying her hair back. When Marcus knocked again, she opened the door with less fear this time. "Ready?" he asked, carrying a box of brushes and paint. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with a shaky smile. They walked together to the downstairs apartment. The place was a mess, dust on the windows, cracked walls, wood floors, dulled by years of wear. Yet Marcus looked at it with a sense of purpose, like he could already see the beauty hidden underneath. "First step," said. "Setting down the supplies is sanding these walls. It's tiring, but it makes everything else easier. You take that side, I'll take this one." Claire picked up the sanding block, awkward at first, but determined. The rough surface scratched against the wall, dust rising in the air. Her arms ached quickly, but Marcus worked beside her, steady and focused. Every so often he glanced her way, offering advice. "Lighter pressure," he said once, guiding her hand. "Like this." His fingers brushed hers briefly, sending a spark through her that she quickly shook off. Hours passed, and the room slowly began to change. The walls grew smoother, the space less tired. Sweat beaded on her forehead, but strangely, she felt proud. She was doing something real, something visible. When they finally stopped for a break, Marcus handed her a bottle of water. They sat on the dusty floor, backs against opposite walls. The air smelled of wood and old paint, but it felt alive. "You did good today," Marcus said simply. Claire smiled, catching her breath. "I didn't think I could." "That's the thing," he replied. "Most people don't know what they're capable of until they try." She looked at him, really looked, and realized this wasn't just about sanding walls or painting rooms. He was teaching her something deeper, about strength, about possibility, about believing she wasn't helpless, as the evening light streamed through the dirty windows. Claire felt a shift inside her. What began as fear of losing her home had turned into the start of something unexpected. Marcus wasn't just giving her time, he was giving her a chance to stand taller, and though she wouldn't admit it out loud, the thought of seeing him again tomorrow brought a warmth that had nothing to do with rent at all. Days turned into a rhythm. Claire arrived at the downstairs apartment each evening, tired but eager. Marcus was already there, unpacking tools or sorting paint cans, his movements efficient yet calm. She quickly realized that working alongside him was different from anything she had done before. The tasks weren't easy, scraping old paint, sanding rough wood, painting long stretches of wall, but there was a steady rhythm to it, a satisfaction in seeing progress. At first, their conversations were practical. "Pass me the brush," Claire would say. "Be careful with that corner," Marcus would respond. They spoke in short, precise sentences, their focus shared between the work and each other. Yet slowly, the walls around their words began to soften. Marcus asked about her day at the bookstore, and Claire admitted how much she worried about bills and schedules. He listened without judgment, offering advice only when she asked for it. One evening, after a long day of painting, Claire paused to step back and admire the progress. "It's starting to look good," she said, surprised by the pride in her own voice. Marcus joined her, standing close enough that she felt the warmth of his presence. "Not bad for a beginner," he teased lightly, though his eyes carried more admiration than mockery. She laughed, a little self-conscious, but the sound was genuine. Marcus's smile deepened. It wasn't just kindness, it was attention, awareness, a quiet appreciation that made her heart flutter. She hadn't realized how much she craved that. Someone noticing her efforts beyond just the surface. Days passed, and the small gestures began to matter more. Marcus would hand her the paint tray, lingering a second longer than needed, or offer to carry something heavy, refusing her protests. Claire noticed it, but instead of feeling awkward, it gave her courage. She started initiating small conversations about books, movies, even dreams she hadn't shared with anyone in years. Marcus listened, never interrupting, sometimes sharing his own thoughts. Then came the evening of the old floorboards. Marcus had decided they needed extra sanding before being refinished. It was tedious work, exhausting even, and Claire's arms ached faster than usual. She paused, wiping sweat from her forehead, and looked over at him. Marcus had that steady, calm expression as he worked, but he glanced at her and offered a small nod of encouragement. "You're doing fine," he said quietly. His voice was soft but carried weight, enough to make her stop and smile despite the exhaustion. "Really?" For a moment, the room felt quiet, except for the sound of sanding and their breathing. She noticed how his hand moved, how his brow furrowed in concentration. And a strange thought crossed her mind: how easy it was to be near him. How safe, how alive. Later, when they finally rested on the old wooden steps of the building, the sun sinking low and painting the walls golden, Claire felt a vulnerability she hadn't allowed herself in months. "Marcus," she said, almost whispering, "why are you being so patient with me? I mean, you didn't have to do this." He shifted to face her, his eyes catching the sunlight, making them look warmer than ever. "Because you matter," he said simply. "And because I can see more than what's in front of me. You've been carrying so much alone. You don't have to do that here." Claire's chest tightened. Those words felt like a bridge to something she hadn't allowed herself to believe. Interest, closeness, maybe even affection. She looked down, unsure what to say, aware that her pulse had picked up. He continued, quieter now. "Sometimes people enter our lives for a reason, I think. You were meant to be here, not just as someone who needed help, but as someone I can actually connect with. Someone real?" Her breath caught. "Connect with me?" she asked, almost in disbelief. "Yes," he said, leaning back slightly, but keeping his gaze on her. "You've been honest, hardworking, patient. And you care. Those things matter more than you think." Claire felt emotions she hadn't named before Leaf. Hope, a gentle warmth that spread through her chest. She had expected lectures about rent, reminders of responsibility, or perhaps pity. Instead, she was receiving understanding, attention, and a sense that someone actually saw her for who she was. The quiet stretched between them, filled only by the fading sounds of the city outside. The sun dipped lower and shadows stretched across the wooden steps. Claire felt exposed, yet safe. As if she could breathe freely for the first time in weeks, Marcus tilted his head, noticing her gaze. "Hey," he said softly, "don't think too hard. Just enjoy the moment. You're doing more than you realize." She smiled almost shyly, feeling a connection that had started with a simple offer to help, but had grown into something tender. Something charged with unspoken feelings. Each glance, each small gesture built on the last, forming a delicate tension neither of them acknowledged out loud as they packed up for the evening. Marcus offered his hand to help her stand. Their fingers brushed briefly, but it lingered just long enough to leave Claire aware of every heartbeat in her chest. She turned toward him, and for a moment the apartment, the walls, the renovations, all of it faded into the background. It was just the two of them, sharing a moment that felt fragile, yet significant. "Tomorrow," Marcus said, breaking the silence, "we'll finish the north wall and start painting the new trim." His voice was practical, but the underlying warmth was unmistakable. Claire nodded, trying to focus on the words, but the flutter in her chest made her dizzy. She realized that her feelings were changing. What started as gratitude and relief was evolving into something more, something that scared her, but excited her all at once. As she walked back to her apartment later, the streets bathed in twilight. Claire replayed every look, every word from the evening. She thought about Marcus not just as her landlord, but as a man who had quietly broken down her walls and made her feel seen. She wondered if he felt the same tension, the same connection, or if it was only her imagination. By the time she reached her door, she felt both restless and hopeful. There was a quiet anticipation building inside her, one that made the days of work, paint, and sanding more meaningful than any paycheck ever could. And as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't help but think something was shifting between them. Something delicate but real, and she wanted to see where it could go tomorrow. She would return to the apartment. She would pick up the brush, carry the supplies, and continue working alongside Marcus. But she also knew that something else had begun, a connection that went beyond rent, beyond walls, beyond simple gestures. It was tender, emotional, and entirely unexpected, and she couldn't wait to see it unfold. The day finally came when the renovations were complete. Claire stood in the newly finished apartment, taking in the transformation. The walls gleamed with fresh paint, the wooden floors polished to a soft shine, and the windows sparkled in the afternoon light. It was more than a room. It was a testament to weeks of effort, shared laughter, and small triumphs. She could almost feel the energy of every moment they had spent working together in the space. Marcus stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes scanning the apartment with quiet pride. "You did most of this," he said, his voice warm and calm. "Every corner, every brushstroke you made it come alive." Claire smiled, feeling both proud and nervous under his gaze. "We did it together," she replied, It wasn't just words. Their time had been intertwined with effort, conversation, and trust. She realized she had grown attached not just to the apartment, but to him. In ways she hadn't expected. He walked closer, studying her with an intensity that made her heart race. I meant what I said when I offered the work. It wasn't charity. I wanted to see you shine, to trust you, and to share this with someone who cares. Her chest tightened. There it was again, the quiet pull she had felt all along, now stronger and harder to ignore. She didn't just admire him. She longed for the closeness they had built over these days. Her thoughts spun, wondering if he felt the same. If he noticed the way her heart lifted when he smiled, or the way her fingers tingled when he passed a tool to her. Marcus took a deep breath. Leaning slightly against the wall, closer than usual. "Claire," he said slowly, "I have to be honest with you. Rent was never my real concern." Her breath caught. She stared at him, unsure she heard correctly. "What do you mean?" He continued, his tone soft yet certain. "I made sure you had time, that you felt safe. Not because of money, but because I wanted to see you. I wanted other plans." Claire's heart skipped a beat. "Other plans?" She whispered, barely audible. "Yes," he said, stepping a little closer, the warmth of his presence surrounding her. "Plans where you stay, not just as a tenant, but as someone who matters to me. Plans where this space, this effort, all of it becomes the start of something bigger." She felt her knees weaken slightly. The fear she had carried about rent, bills, and survival evaporated, replaced with an overwhelming warmth that spread through her chest. She wanted to believe him, but the truth of her feelings made her cautious. She had grown used to being alone, careful not to let anyone in, and yet Marcus had slowly opened a door she didn't even know she wanted to cross. "You really mean that?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "I do," he said. His dark eyes softened, filled with honesty and something deeper, hope perhaps, or longing. "I didn't just offer help because I had to. I offered it because I wanted to see you grow, to see you smile, to spend time with you. And I still want that. I want more than just this apartment. I want you in my life." Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but not from sadness. From relief, from joy, from the sudden realization that she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. She had walked into this story worried about rent, scared and uncertain. But Marcus had given her trust, companionship, and an unexpected chance at connection. She stepped closer, her hands trembling slightly. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "Then don't say anything," he said softly. "Just let it happen. That's enough." The sun shifted through the windows, bathing them in warm light. For a moment, the world outside the apartment didn't exist. There was only this space, these moments, and the unspoken bond they had built over weeks of work, laughter, and shared effort. Marcus reached out gently, brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was a small gesture, but it carried weight, attention, care, affection. Claire felt a shiver of something she had never felt before, a mix of anticipation and longing, tempered with safety and trust. She realized that this feeling was what she had been missing all along. "I've wanted to say this for a while," Kos admitted, his voice low but firm. "I didn't want to pressure you, but I can't hide it anymore. I like you, Claire. I care about you. And I hope you feel the same." Claire's chest ached with emotion. She had been trying to protect herself, to stay focused on rent, jobs, and survival. But in front of Marcus, all those walls crumbled. Her voice was soft but clear. "I do," she whispered. A smile spread across Marcus's face, a mix of relief and happiness. He took her hand in his, holding it gently but firmly. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a promise, a beginning, a reassurance that neither of them had to face life alone anymore. They stood there in silence, hands entwined, hearts racing. The apartment wasn't just a space anymore. It was a symbol of their journey together. Every wall, every floorboard, every brushstroke represented trust, effort, and the bond that had grown between them. Claire looked around the apartment one last time, taking in the work, the sunlight, and Marcus beside her. She felt a deep sense of peace she hadn't known in months. She wasn't just a tenant who had struggled to pay rent. She was someone valued, trusted, and cared for. Marcus squeezed her hand lightly, breaking the reverie. "So," he said, voice lightening, "what do you think? Ready for our next chapter?" Claire laughed softly, a sound filled with hope and joy. "Yes," she said, her voice steady this time. "I'm ready." And with that, the apartment became more than just a place to live. It became a home, a beginning, a safe space where trust, care, and love could grow. The months of worry and struggle were behind her, replaced by something brighter and full of promise. As the sunlight faded into evening, Claire and Marcus stood together, hand in hand, ready to face the future. Rent had been due, yes, but Marcus had other plans that neither of them could have predicted. Plans that were far more important than money. Plans of connection, hope, and the possibility of a life shared. And for the first time in a long time, Claire felt truly at home.